just do it right. To build an arcade machine, I wanted it to look good and I wanted it to feel sturdy like a vending machine. If it doesn't look good and feel sturdy, you might as well just play on your PC with a mouse and keyboard. I prefer a flat pack. A flat pack is those things you get at IKEA. It's all the furniture comes in a flat box and you take it out and assemble it. There are other options. You can buy a used arcade machine if you have access to one, but they're kind of expensive and you can't get them shipped. You got to buy something local. For the cabinet, what I did, I put a standard power strip, surge strip inside of it, and then you can plug everything that you put in the cabinet inside, and that's why you don't have to do any wiring, high power wiring. You're just plugging stuff in, and then you plug that, or you cut the end off the wire and hook it to a power switch. So one switch will turn on the whole surge strip. The arcade machine, you do add a light to it. Most of the flat packs don't come with a light. You add a light at the top behind the marquee. It gives it that bright, like lights up the title. I think that's important. You can just put a sticker up there, but it's nice to have a light if you can put it in.
So if it's a monitor in the arcade, how would you secure the monitor to the case?
That depends on your monitor. I took mine out of the plastic because most of them, when you take them out of the plastic, there's some metal, some screw holes that you can mount with the brackets to screw it to the front of the arcade machine, but it's going to depend on your monitor and how you set it up. Mine are a little dated, so I use 4:3, which is exactly the same that was in the arcade machine, the 4:3 ratio. Now that's going to be hard to find. You're going to get 16:9, which isn't bad. So this is the artwork that would be on the side of the screen normally. So you put the widescreen in, and then all the widescreen does is display the artwork that would have been there. It's actually a good choice to do the widescreen. So MAME is the program you're going to use to run the arcade ROMs. The ROMs are the actual chips encoded into software. The chips that were in the arcade machines encoded into software, and then MAME runs that software as if it was a chip. MAME runs on almost anything, so you don't need a big fancy PC. You just need any kind of PC to run inside of it. You want to get a motherboard that, and this is a little hard to find, you want to get a motherboard that when you power it up, it automatically comes on. You don't want to have to hit the power button and turn it on. This is so when you flip that switch on the back of the case, all the devices inside that arcade machine come on, including the motherboard. And also when you get a motherboard and all the parts, you want to limit the moving parts as much as possible. It's just so you don't have wear and tear. It's kind of nice to just let your arcade machine run, and it's not like a PC making, fan noises. You have to worry about things wearing out. So that means avoid mechanical hard drives, get an SSD or an M2. Avoid anything with fans. So if you can get passive cooling for your CPU, a heatsink that just cools through natural circulation. Also, you don't want to get a video card because they usually come with fans. You want to get a motherboard with onboard video that doesn't have a fan. When I first built my arcade machine, I actually took the motherboard and drilled some holes and zip tied the motherboard to the case. And that worked okay, but now I actually have the whole PC case in there. PC cases are nice. They have places to mount hard drives. They have places to mount the motherboard. Like, it's just a lot more secure. So now I just put a whole PC in there and I screw it to the inside of the case with some angle brackets, and that secures everything in there, because you will be moving the arcade machines around. People want to borrow them. You want to make sure everything's securely in there. The monitor's securely in there and the computer case is in there, really secure. So sound in an arcade machine is really important. When you think of an arcade, that bassy sound of the arcade playing, that is what you remember, and that is by design. You can take regular speakers, PC speakers, and mount them inside of the computer case, and that gives you that good treble sound. But if you can add a subwoofer too, that's even better. You also want speakers that can power up as soon as you turn the case on, just like everything else we've been talking about. Hit that power switch in the back of the computer, and those speakers should come on without you having to hit any additional buttons. If you can get speakers that mount towards the front of the case, so this way the player is the one who hears the speakers, that's even better. In my case, I did not have a place for the speakers, but it worked fine. It sounds great. So for the arcade machine, at the very minimum, you can just use regular PC speakers. They have to be powered speakers, something you plug in. They can't just be like headphone speakers. You want something with some sound. And if you can get something with a built-in subwoofer, that's great. If you can get a second subwoofer and get that really true arcade bassy sound, that's even better. Another option would be to mount true, just regular speakers, or take the speaker out of the PC speaker and mount it somewhere where the player can hear it. This allows you to keep the volume a little lower. The player can still hear it, but it's not annoying everybody in the room. It gives you that the treble sound stays close, and they just hear the bass from the distance, just like the real arcade machine did. In my opinion, controls are arguably the most important part of the arcade machine. It's the part you're going to touch. It's the part that you're going to mash down on the keys and you want to be able to bang on the joystick. This is where you want this machine to be as strong as a vending machine. This is the most important part. It's the part you're going to enjoy. For the arcade machine, you've seen they have joysticks, they have buttons, some of them have balls and dials, they have all kinds of stuff. In this case, we're putting a computer in there, so we need a way of controlling all these. It's a little simpler than it sounds. In my case, I took a keyboard apart and used the controller board from the keyboard and then soldered everything in. So in reality, when you're hitting a button, you're actually hitting a letter on the keyboard. And it makes it easier to map. Nowadays, people actually sell little controller boards, like 20 bucks, and you don't have to solder anything. Hook the connector to one of the switches on the buttons, and you run that wire to the screw block and screw it in. So there's no soldering, there's no nothing, so they made it a lot easier. I would go with one of those controller boards to control all your buttons and controls. When you're purchasing that keyboard controller board, or even if you're using an old keyboard, there's something to be aware of. It's called N-key rollover. An N-key rollover means how many keys you can hit at once before you're completely ignored. And for the new, I used PS2, you could use as many keys as you want, which was wonderful. But now with USB keyboards, they've cheapened them up a bit, unless you get a really good gaming keyboard. And you can only usually do 6 keys. And you may be thinking to yourself, when is anybody gonna hit 6 buttons on an arcade machine? But if you think about it, their joysticks were not analog, they were digital. Up is a key, left is a key. So if you hit up and to the left and hit 2 buttons, you've just used 4 of your N-key rollover. So for a single player game, not too big of a deal. You're not gonna be able to hit 6 things. Like in my case, I have a 2-player one, like Mortal Kombat. You both have a stick, you both have buttons, and if both players are playing, 6 keys is not enough. Make sure to be aware of the machine you're building and the N-key rollover. A lot of times those controller boards you build are made with more rollover. Just make sure to verify it. In addition to your controls, a couple things you have to really remember is that there are other triggers on arcade machines. For example, when you put a quarter in, that's a trigger. There's usually a start button to start the game. And there's usually, in MAME, there's a button to leave the game, only because you have multiple games to pick from. In an arcade machine, you played Asteroids or Galaga or whatever game. In a MAME machine, you have to be able to start game and end game. So there's 3 or 4 other additional controls you need to think about that'll be controlled by your keyboard controller. All right, how to choose a layout. In my single player arcade machine Stinger, I chose a joystick and 6 buttons, but then I also liked games like Centipede, so I put a trackball in there. I really like Centipede. There was another game, I don't know if you guys remember, called Tempest, and then there's Tron, and they use the dial. Luckily, I discovered I could still play those games with the trackball. For my single player game, that was my perfect layout, but you would have to choose whatever games you like. You may not need a trackball at all. All right, so the last thing to talk about is the software you put on the machine. I use Windows 95. I'm probably soon gonna upgrade to Windows 10. Windows 10 is a good choice. You just wanna make sure that you can turn off the power save mode so the machine just runs continuously. You don't wanna have to power it on and power it off to get it to come back. Find a nice MAME front end. MAME's a great program, but it kind of has like a Windows-based front end. You want something that you can use that, because you don't have a mouse and keyboard hooked to it. You want to be able to use the joystick and the buttons to pick your next game. Try to find a nice MAME front end, and then go out and find your favorite ROMs, and make sure to find the artwork to go with them, especially if you want the widescreen and you want to be able to show that artwork on the side of the 16:9 monitor, because the old monitors are 4:3. Gives you a place to put the art. So have fun, go out and start downloading.